My sister helped my ex win custody over my son, but I found out why she really turned against me. The moment I walked into the courthouse, I realized my biggest betrayal wasn't coming from my ex. It was sitting right beside him. My own sister was testifying against me, painting me as an unfit mother in front of everyone. I stood frozen in the doorway, clutching my lawyer's arm so hard I probably left marks. There she was, Andrea, my big sister, the woman who taught me to ride a bike and held my hair back when I was sick, sitting at the opposing table like she belonged there. She wore her navy blazer, the one I helped her pick out for job interviews 3 years ago. Her hair was pulled back in that perfect bun she always managed, but I could never replicate. Professional, trustworthy, the kind of person judges listen to. Your Honor, she was saying, her voice carrying across the room with practiced confidence. I've witnessed firsthand how my sister's erratic behavior has affected my nephew. Just last month, I found him crying because she'd forgotten to pick him up from school. Again, the lie hit me like cold water. I'd never forgotten a pickup. Not once. But there she was, spinning fiction with the same voice that used to read me bedtime stories. My lawyer, Rebecca Stone, squeezed my elbow. Breathe, she whispered. We knew this might happen. But we hadn't known. Not really. I'd suspected my ex, Caleb, would get nasty. I'd prepared for him to twist every argument we'd ever had. Every moment of exhaustion from single parenting. Every time I'd needed help. What I hadn't prepared for was watching my sister help him do it. She's unstable, Andrea continued, gesturing toward me like I was evidence in a crime scene. Her apartment is a mess. She can barely keep herself together, let alone care for a 5-year-old. Judge Morrison, a stern woman with silver hair and reading glasses that made her look perpetually skeptical, scribbled notes. She'd been presiding over family court for 15 years. She'd seen every trick in the book, but she'd never met my sister. Andrea had always been good with people. Charming. The kind of person who remembered your birthday and asked about your dog by name. Teachers loved her. Bosses promoted her. Men dated her seriously. Not like the string of disasters I'd collected over the years. I love my sister, she said, and I swear she managed to look sad about it. But love doesn't make someone a good parent. The words twisted something deep in my chest. Love doesn't make someone a good parent. She'd said those exact words to me 2 months ago, but in a completely different context. We'd been talking about our own mother, about how mom had tried her best, but sometimes love wasn't enough to fix everything. Now Andrea was using our private conversation against me in court. Caleb sat next to his lawyer looking smug. He'd gained weight since our divorce. Stress eating, probably, though he'd never admit it. His tie was crooked. 6 months ago, I would have reached over and straightened it without thinking. I clenched my fist to stop myself from yanking the crooked tie straight. He was going for full custody, not joint custody, like most divorced fathers. Full custody of Liam, my baby, my everything. And apparently, he'd recruited my own sister to help him steal my son. Mrs. Porter, Judge Morrison said, addressing Andrea with the respect that came automatically when someone looked put together and spoke incomplete sentences. How long have you observed these concerning behaviors? Since the divorce proceedings began, Andrea replied smoothly. The stress has been overwhelming for her. She's been drinking more, staying out later, leaving Liam with babysitters he doesn't know. Another lie. I'd had 2 glasses of wine with dinner exactly once in the past month, and Andrea had been there. She'd encouraged it, actually, saying I needed to relax. As for babysitters, the only person I'd left Liam with was Andrea herself. My stomach twisted as I realized what she was doing. Every confidence I'd shared, every moment of vulnerability, every time I'd admitted to struggling, she was weaponizing all of it. Rebecca stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about my client's mental state. Sustained, Judge Morrison said, but the damage was done. Andrea had planted seeds of doubt, and they were already taking root. I can provide specific examples, Andrea said before anyone could stop her. Last Tuesday, I went to check on them and found dirty dishes piled in the sink, laundry everywhere, and Liam eating cereal for dinner because she'd forgotten to grocery shop. I had been sick with the flu. Andrea knew that. She'd brought me soup and offered to help clean up, but I'd told her not to worry about it. Liam had specifically requested cereal for dinner, Lucky Charms his favorite treat, and I'd given in because I felt guilty about being bedridden all day. But the way she told it, I sounded neglectful, incompetent. Your Honor, Rebecca tried again, we'd like to cross-examine this witness. In due time, Counselor. Judge Morrison turned back to Andrea. Mrs. Porter, are you aware of any substance abuse issues? My heart stopped. Substance abuse? I barely took Tylenol when I had a headache. Not drugs, Andrea said carefully, but she's been relying heavily on alcohol to cope, and prescription sleep aids. She mentioned taking them together to shut off her brain after particularly difficult days. I had said that once, when I'd been so exhausted from working double shifts and dealing with Caleb's lawyer that I couldn't fall asleep. I'd taken some sleep medicine that my doctor had prescribed after the divorce and mentioned to Andrea that it helped quiet the anxiety spiraling in my head. She'd made it sound like I was popping pills and chasing them with vodka. The courtroom felt smaller with every word she spoke. The walls were pressing in, the air getting thinner. This was my sister. The person who'd held my hand when Mom died, who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd been in the delivery room when Liam was born, crying almost as hard as I was when they placed him on my chest. That same sister was now systematically dismantling my life. Mrs. Porter, Judge Morrison said, in your opinion, would it be in the child's best interest to remain in his mother's primary custody? Andrea looked directly at me then, and for just a second I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Regret? It was gone so fast I might have imagined it. No, Your Honor, she said quietly. I believe Liam would be safer and more stable with his father. The gavel might as well have been a sledgehammer hitting my chest. Caleb's lawyer, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, nodded approvingly. Caleb himself looked like he was trying not to smile. And my sister, my big sister who'd taught me everything about being strong, sat there looking like she'd just performed a mercy killing. Rebecca was writing furiously, probably preparing our counterattack. But what could we say? That Andrea was lying? She was family. She had no obvious motive to hurt me. To Judge Morrison, she looked like a concerned aunt trying to protect her nephew. If only she knew Andrea was being paid for her concern. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that my world was crumbling, and the person I'd trusted most in it was holding the wrecking ball. We'll recess for 15 minutes, Judge Morrison announced. When we return, we'll hear from the defense. As people filed out of the the courtroom, Andrea finally looked at me again. She mouthed something that might have been, "I'm sorry," but her eyes were hard, determined. Whatever apology she thought she was offering, it was too little and too late. My son's future hung in the balance, and my sister had just thrown her weight onto the wrong side of the scale. To understand how completely Andrea destroyed me in that courtroom, you need to know what she meant to me before everything went wrong. Andrea was 8 years older, which made her less of a sister and more of a third parent growing up. When Mom worked double shifts at the hospital, Andrea picked me up from school. When I had nightmares, she let me crawl into her bed. When kids made fun of my thick glasses and secondhand clothes, she walked me to class the next day and dared anyone to say something. She was everything I wanted to be: smart, confident, successful. While I struggled through community college and dead-end jobs, Andrea graduated with honors and landed a position at a marketing firm downtown. She had her own apartment at 22, a reliable car, and a savings account that didn't make her panic when she looked at it. I was 26 when I met Caleb at a bar where Andrea was celebrating a work promotion. He was charming in that easy way some men have. Quick smile, good listener, the type who remembered your drink order. Andrea approved immediately. "He's stable," she told me later, and coming from her, that was the highest compliment. "You need stable." She was right. My dating history was a parade of musicians, bartenders, and guys who lived in their parents' basements. Caleb had a steady job in insurance, a condo, and actual furniture instead of milk crates and mattresses on the floor. When he proposed after a year of dating, Andrea helped me pick out my wedding dress. The marriage lasted 3 years. Long enough for me to get pregnant with Liam, long enough for me to realize that Caleb's stability came with a price. He controlled everything: what we watched on TV, where we went for dinner, how I spent money. He made me feel grateful for things I should have taken for granted, like having an opinion about our own life. When Liam was born, things got worse. Caleb wanted me to stay home but complained about money constantly. He criticized my parenting while refusing to help with night feedings or diaper changes. I was drowning, but every time I tried to talk to him, he made me feel like I was being dramatic. Andrea saw it happening. She'd come over and find me still in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, dishes piled up, Liam crying while I sat on the couch feeling like a failure. She never judged me for it. She just rolled up her sleeves and helped. "You're not okay," she told me one afternoon while folding baby clothes I'd left in the dryer for 3 days. "This isn't working." I started crying. The ugly, messy kind of crying that scares babies and makes your nose run. I don't know what's wrong with me. Other women do this. Other women don't have husbands who act like having a family is some kind of favor they're doing you. That was the moment I knew she was right. Andrea didn't sugarcoat things. She never told me what I wanted to hear just to make me feel better. When she said something, I listened. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. Caleb fought me on everything: custody, money, who got the couch. He wanted Liam on weekends and alternate holidays, which seemed reasonable until I realized he was already planning to move 2 hours away for a job promotion. Weekend visits would become phone calls and birthday cards if I was lucky. Through it all, Andrea was my anchor. She helped me find a lawyer, loaned me money for the retainer, and let me cry in her kitchen at least twice a week. When I couldn't afford daycare, she adjusted her work schedule to watch Liam. When I needed someone to talk to at 2 in the morning because I was spiraling about custody arrangements, she answered her phone. "You're a good mother," she'd remind me whenever doubt crept in. "Don't let him convince you otherwise." I believed her because I had to. When your whole world is falling apart, you cling to the people who tell you you're going to be okay. Andrea had been telling me that my entire life, and she'd never been wrong before. We developed a routine after the divorce. Every Sunday, I'd drive Liam over to her apartment for family dinner. She'd cook something elaborate: homemade pasta, roasted chicken, elaborate desserts that took all afternoon. Liam would play with the puzzle collection she kept in her spare room while we talked about work, dating, and the thousand small struggles of single motherhood. Caleb called again about Christmas. I'd tell her, and she'd roll her eyes. What did he want this time? Liam for the whole week. Says his parents are flying in from Arizona and they never get to see their grandson. His parents didn't bother visiting when you were married. Now suddenly they're devoted grandparents? She had a way of cutting through Caleb's manipulations that I couldn't manage on my own. When he tried to make me feel guilty for keeping his son away from him, Andrea reminded me that he'd chosen to move to another city. When he complained about child support, she pointed out that I was covering daycare, insurance, and everything else while working 2 part-time jobs. "Don't let him rewrite history," she'd say. "You know what really happened." Those Sunday dinners became the highlight of my week. Liam adored his Aunt Andrea. She was the fun adult who let him have dessert before dinner and taught him card games that were probably too advanced for a 4-year-old. She bought him books and art supplies, took him to the zoo, and listened with genuine interest when he explained the plot of whatever cartoon he was obsessed with that week. I trusted her completely, with my son, with my secrets, with my fears about whether I was screwing up this whole parenting thing. When Liam started having nightmares about his dad moving away, I called Andrea. When I worried that working so much was hurting my relationship with my son, Andrea reassured me. "You're doing what you have to do to take care of him," she'd say. "He'll understand that when he's older." She was my voice of reason, my sounding board, my safety net, the one person in the world I knew would always be on my side. That's what made her betrayal so devastating. It wasn't just that she lied about me in court, it was that she used everything I'd told her, every moment of weakness, every confession, every time I'd admitted to struggling, as ammunition against me. The woman who'd held my hair back when I was sick was now trying to take my son away. The sister who taught me to be strong was the one tearing me down. I should have seen the signs. Looking back, I can trace the exact moment things started to change. It was 6 months before the custody hearing, right around the time Caleb started threatening to petition for full custody instead of just increased visitation. Andrea began asking more questions during our Sunday dinners. Not the supportive, sisterly kind she'd always asked, but probing ones that felt like job interviews. "How are you managing financially? Really managing, I mean. Are you dating anyone? Because if Caleb's lawyers find out, they might use it against you. You seem tired lately. Are you getting enough sleep?" I thought she was looking out for me, helping me prepare for whatever Caleb might throw at me. I told her everything. About the nights I lay awake worrying about money, about the guy I'd gone on 3 dates with but wasn't sure about the prescription sleep aids my doctor had given me to help with anxiety. She was gathering intelligence, building a case, and I was handing her everything she needed to destroy me. The worst part is that I would have done anything for her. If she'd needed money, I would have found a way to help. If she'd been in trouble, I would have dropped everything everything to be there. She was my sister, my role model, my closest friend. But apparently our relationship wasn't worth more than whatever Caleb was paying her. I just didn't know it yet. The first crack in our relationship appeared during Thanksgiving dinner at our cousin Rachel's house. I should have paid attention to it, but I was too busy trying to keep Liam from spilling cranberry sauce on Rachel's white tablecloth. "You look exhausted," Andrea said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Are you getting any sleep at all?" It wasn't the words that bothered me, it was the way she said them. Concerned, but with an edge of judgment that hadn't been there before. Like she was making a point instead of asking a question. "I'm fine," I said, bouncing Liam on my knee. "Just busy with work. 2 jobs will do that to you." She turned to our cousin. "She's working herself to the bone trying to make ends meet. I keep telling her she needs to ask for help more often." The conversation moved on, but something felt off. Andrea had never announced my financial struggles to the family before. She'd always been protective of my privacy, especially around relatives who had their own opinions about my divorce. A week later, she did it again. This time at Liam's kindergarten holiday party, where I was helping serve juice boxes while trying to look like I had everything together. "At least one of us remembered to bring napkins," Andrea said to another parent, gesturing at the pack in her purse. "My sister's been so scattered lately, I've started bringing backup supplies to everything." The other parent laughed politely, but I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I hadn't forgotten napkins. I'd brought paper towels instead, which worked just as well. But Andrea made it sound like I was falling apart. "Andrea," I said quietly, "can I talk to you for a second?" We stepped into the hallway outside Liam's classroom. The walls were covered with construction paper snowflakes and handprint turkeys. It should have felt cheerful, but my stomach was twisting. "What was that about?" I asked. "What was what about?" "The comment about me being scattered, and the thing at Thanksgiving about me not asking for help." She looked genuinely confused. "I'm worried about you. You've been running yourself ragged, and I can see it's taking a toll. Someone needs to say something, but not in front of other people. Not in front of Liam's teachers. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I just think you need to hear that it's okay to not be perfect all the time." The conversation felt reasonable on the surface, but something underneath it wasn't right. Andrea had never felt the need to point out my flaws in public before. She'd always been the first to defend me when other people criticized my choices. I brushed it off. Single parenting was stressful, and maybe I was being oversensitive. Andrea had been looking out for me my whole life. Why would that change now? But it kept happening. Little comments that seemed supportive but left me feeling exposed and defensive. At the grocery store, she'd mention how I used to be better with money before the divorce. Took such a toll on my decision-making. At family gatherings, she'd joke about my creative housekeeping or wonder aloud if I was eating enough because I looked thin. Each comment was small enough to seem caring, but they added up to a portrait of someone who was struggling, overwhelmed, and barely keeping it together. The worst part was that some of it was true. I was tired. I was stressed about money. My apartment wasn't always pristine because I was working 50 hours a week and raising a 5-year-old alone. But hearing Andrea broadcast my struggles felt like betrayal. "Why are you doing this?" I asked her one Sunday after she'd made a comment about my erratic schedule in front of Liam. "Doing what?" "Making me sound like a disaster every time we're around other people." She set down her coffee cup and looked at me with what seemed like genuine concern. "I'm not making you sound like anything. I'm observing what I see. You never used to observe things out loud. Maybe because I'm finally willing to tell you the truth instead of just enabling you." Enabling me. That was a new phrase in Andrea's vocabulary. I'd never heard her use it before, but suddenly it was showing up in every conversation we had about my life. "I enabled you through your marriage by not speaking up about how unhealthy it was," she continued. "I enabled you after the divorce by swooping in to fix everything instead of letting you figure things out yourself. Maybe it's time for some tough love." Tough love. Another new phrase. It sounded like something she'd read in a self-help book or heard from someone else. It didn't sound like my sister. "Since when do you think I need tough love?" "Since I realized that constantly rescuing you isn't helping either of us." The conversation left me shaken. Not because Andrea was wrong. I had relied on her heavily since the divorce, but because the sister who'd once told me I was stronger than I knew was now suggesting I was weak and dependent. Our Sunday dinners became minefields. Andrea would ask probing questions about my job, my finances, my dating life, then find ways to work my answers into conversations with other people later. She'd take photos of Liam looking tired or upset and post them on social media with captions about how hard single parenting could be. "Look at this little guy after a long day," she'd write under a picture of Liam crying because he'd dropped his ice cream. Sometimes being 5 is just too much. The posts weren't technically lies. Kids do get tired and upset, but the way she framed them made it seem like Liam was constantly miserable, which wasn't true. Most of the time, he was a happy, curious kid who laughed at everything and told elaborate stories about his imaginary friend, Captain Dinosaur. But Andrea never posted photos of those moments. She never shared the videos of Liam singing in the bathtub or the drawings he made of our family that included stick figures of him, me, and his stuffed elephant. She only documented the meltdowns and the rough days. I started dreading our family time together. Every interaction felt like a performance review where I was failing. When Liam spilled juice on his shirt, Andrea would sigh and say something about how kids need consistent routines. When he got cranky because his nap schedule was off, she'd mention how important sleep schedules were for developing children. "Are you keeping a journal or something?" I asked her one day after she'd made particularly detailed observations about Liam's eating habits. "What do you mean? You seem to be documenting every little thing that goes wrong." "I'm paying attention because I care about him. Someone has to. Someone has to." As if I wasn't paying attention to my own child. As if I wasn't the one who knew he only ate sandwiches cut diagonally, that he was afraid of automatic hand dryers in public bathrooms, that he liked to fall asleep listening to the same 3 songs on repeat. But according to Andrea's version of events, I was missing everything important. I was too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed to properly care for my son. The breaking point came during Liam's 6th birthday party. I'd planned it for weeks, rented a pavilion at the park, ordered a superhero cake, bought enough party favors to supply a small army. 20 kids showed up, and for 3 hours, Liam was the happiest kid on the planet, except for one moment. He'd been running around for hours and suddenly hit a wall of exhaustion. He melted down when another kid grabbed a balloon he'd been saving, and I had to carry him to a quiet spot to calm down. It lasted maybe 5 minutes before he was ready to rejoin the party, but Andrea was there with her phone, documenting the whole meltdown. Later, she posted a photo of Liam mid-sob with the caption, "Even birthday boys have their limits. Sometimes the best gift is knowing when to call it it a day. I confronted her about it that night after all the guests had gone home. Why did you post that picture? It was a real moment. Kids have feelings, and there's nothing wrong with showing that. But it wasn't representative of the party. He was happy for 95% of it. So I should only post the perfect moments? That's not honest. You should post moments that show who he actually is, not just the worst 5 minutes of his day. Maybe if you spent less time worried about appearances and more time addressing the actual problems, these meltdowns wouldn't happen so often. There it was again. The implication that I was missing something crucial, that I was too concerned with looking good to be a good parent. The conversation felt like being slowly poisoned by someone who kept insisting they were helping. I started limiting our visits. Instead of every Sunday, maybe twice a month. Instead of staying for hours, I'd find reasons to leave early. I told myself I needed space to think, to figure out why my relationship with my sister felt so toxic all of a sudden. But pulling back only made things worse. Now Andrea had another narrative to spread. I was isolating myself and keeping Liam away from family. She's gotten so defensive lately. I heard her telling our cousin Rachel over the phone. I'd called to ask if I could borrow a folding table for Liam's school fundraiser, and Rachel had put me on speaker without realizing Andrea was there. Everything's a criticism to her now, Andrea continued. I can't even express concern without her taking it as a personal attack. I hung up before they realized I was listening, but the damage was done. Now Rachel probably thought I was paranoid and hostile, another family member who'd heard Andrea's version of events before mine. The manipulation was so subtle, I almost didn't recognize it as manipulation. Andrea never said anything that was completely false. I was tired. I did struggle financially. Liam did have occasional meltdowns, but she was taking normal challenges of single parenting and reframing them as evidence that I was failing. What made it worse was that I started believing some of it. When you hear the same message from someone you trust, it becomes harder to distinguish between their perception and reality. Maybe I was more scattered than I realized. Maybe I was too defensive. Maybe I really wasn't handling things as well as I thought. The doubt was the cruelest part. Andrea had spent decades building up my confidence, and now she was systematically tearing it down. She made me question everything. My instincts as a mother, my ability to provide for my son, my judgment about what was normal versus concerning. I stopped confiding in her completely, which only gave her more ammunition. Now I was shutting everyone out and refusing help. The woman who'd once been my closest ally was building a case against me, and I was too confused and hurt to understand why. I should have confronted her directly. I should have demanded to know what had changed and why she was treating me like the enemy. Instead, I retreated further, hoping that if I just got my act together enough, she'd go back to being the supportive sister I remembered. But Andrea wasn't trying to help me improve. She was trying to document my failures, and I was giving her plenty of material to work with, because single parenting is hard and no one gets it right all the time. By the time I realized what was really happening, she'd already laid the groundwork for destroying me in court. Every confidence I'd shared, every moment of vulnerability, every normal parenting struggle had been carefully cataloged and weaponized. The sister who taught me to be strong was using my strength against me. She was turning my trust into evidence of my weakness. And the worst part was I still didn't know why. The first clue came from my friend Brooke, who worked downtown and sometimes grabbed lunch at the trendy cafe district near the courthouse. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry and watching Liam build elaborate towers with his blocks. This is probably nothing, she said, but I saw Andrea today having coffee with some woman in a really expensive suit. They looked pretty intense. When you say intense, like documents spread all over the table, taking notes, leaning in close, business meeting intense, not catch up with friends intense. My hands stilled on the small t-shirt I was folding. What did the woman look like? Blonde, maybe 45, power suit. She had this whole lawyer vibe going on. The description made my stomach clench. It sounded exactly like Victoria Cross, Caleb's attorney. I'd met her twice during settlement negotiations, and she was the kind of person who made you feel like you were being cross-examined during casual conversation. Did you hear any of what they were talking about? I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I walked past their table, I caught something about building a stronger case and documented evidence. Sorry, I know that's not much help. Building a stronger case. The phrase stuck with me long after we hung up. What case would Andrea be discussing with someone who looked like Caleb's lawyer? I told myself I was being paranoid. There were plenty of lawyers in expensive suits who grabbed coffee downtown. Just because this woman looked like Victoria Cross didn't mean she was Victoria Cross. But doubt had been planted, and it grew quickly. 2 days later, I decided to test my theory. I called Andrea and mentioned casually that Caleb's lawyer had been asking for character references. Really? Andrea's voice sharpened with interest. What kind of references? People who've seen me with Liam regularly, I guess. Rebecca thinks it's just standard procedure, but it made me nervous. You should be nervous. Character witnesses can make or break a custody case. The way she said it felt too knowledgeable, too confident, like she'd been researching custody battles or talking to someone who had. Have you been reading about custody law? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Just trying to understand what you're going through. I want to be supportive. Supportive. That word had lost all meaning between us. I started paying closer attention to Andrea's schedule and behavior. She'd always been busy with work and social obligations, but lately she'd been mysteriously unavailable at odd times. Wednesday afternoon coffee dates that ran long, Saturday morning errands that took all day, phone calls she'd step outside to take, even when we were at family gatherings. The next piece of evidence came from Facebook, of all places. I was scrolling through my feed when I saw that Andrea had checked in at Meridian Restaurant, the expensive steakhouse downtown that she usually said was overpriced and pretentious. The timestamp was from last Thursday at 7:30 p.m. That same Thursday, she'd canceled our dinner plans because she was coming down with something and needed to rest. Meridian Restaurant wasn't where you went when you were sick. It was where you went for business dinners and celebrations, the kind of place where people discussed important deals over $100 bottles of wine. I screenshot the check-in before she could delete it. My paranoia was turning into investigation mode, and I didn't like the person I was becoming. But Andrea's behavior had been so strange for months that I couldn't ignore the possibility that something was seriously wrong. The breakthrough came when I was helping Liam with a school project about family trees. He needed photos of relatives, and I remembered that Andrea had taken some great pictures at our cousin's wedding last summer. I texted her asking if she could send them to me. Can't find them right now, she replied. Maybe later. That was unusual. Andrea was obsessively organized about photos. She had albums dating back to high school, all labeled and chronologically arranged. She could find any picture within minutes. But when I was at her apartment the following Sunday, I noticed her laptop was open on the kitchen counter with a photo editing program running. She was cropping a picture of Liam from the wedding. Specifically, she was removing me from the frame. What are you working on? I asked. She quickly minimized the window. Just organizing old pictures. Can I see? Maybe you found those family photos Liam needs. Later, I'm not finished yet, but I'd already seen enough. The edited photo showed Liam looking tired and slightly overwhelmed, which he had been toward the end of a long day. But in the original version I'd glimpsed, he was holding my hand and smiling. Andrea had carefully removed the context that showed him happy and secure with his mother. She was creating a false narrative, one photo at a time. That night, I called Brooke back. I need you to do me a favor, and it's going to sound completely paranoid. What kind of favor? If you see Andrea downtown again, especially with that lawyer-looking woman, can you try to get a picture? Or at least try to hear more of their conversation? Are you serious? I think my sister might be working with my ex's legal team. I know how that sounds, but things have been really off with her lately. Brooke was quiet for a moment. How off? I told her about the strange schedule changes, the canceled plans, the weird questions Andrea had been asking about my finances and dating life. I told her about the photo editing and the sudden expertise in custody law. That does sound suspicious, Brooke admitted. Okay, I'll keep my eyes open. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Brooke called me with excitement in her voice. I saw them again. Same cafe, same table. And you're right, it's definitely Victoria Cross. I looked her up online after you described her. What were they talking about? I managed to sit at the table behind them and pretend to work on my laptop. They were going over some kind of timeline. Andrea had a notebook full of dates and notes. She was telling Victoria about times when Liam seemed upset or when you seemed stressed. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. What kind of notes? Specific stuff, like March 15th, Liam crying after school pickup, seemed hungry. And March 22nd, apartment messy when I visited, dishes in sink. She had pages of this stuff. Andrea had been building a case against me for months. Every visit, every interaction, every small moment of normal parenting stress. She'd been documenting it all as evidence of my incompetence. There's more, Brooke continued. Victoria handed her an envelope. It looked thick, like there was cash in it. The room tilted around me. Cash? I can't be sure, but Andrea checked inside the envelope and nodded before putting it in her purse. It definitely looked like some kind of payment. My sister was being paid to spy on me, to document my failures, to build a case for why I shouldn't have custody of my own son. I hung up and immediately called Rebecca Stone. I need to see you as soon as possible, I told her. I think I know why Caleb is so confident about getting full custody. Rebecca met me at her office that evening after her regular hours. I laid out everything. The mysterious meetings, the photo editing, the documented observations, the possible payment. This is serious, she said when I finished. If your sister is being compensated to provide testimony against you, that's witness tampering. But we need proof. What kind of proof? Bank records, text messages, emails, anything that shows coordination between her and Caleb's legal team, anything that proves payment for testimony. I knew Andrea's passwords. We'd shared Netflix and Hulu accounts for years, and she'd always used variations of the same password for everything. It felt like a violation to even consider using that information against her, but she'd been violating my trust for months. That night, after Liam was asleep, I opened the shared family account we'd both used for years to swap photos and schedules. My hands shook as the inbox loaded and I began searching. I found them immediately. Dozens of emails over the past 4 months, starting right around the time Andrea's behavior had begun to change. The subject lines made me sick. Timeline of concerning incidents. Additional documentation. March observations. Payment schedule confirmation. Testimony preparation meeting. Thursday 3 p.m. I opened the oldest email first, dated 4 months ago. Andrea, thank you for agreeing to help us build a comprehensive case for Caleb's custody petition. As discussed, we'll need detailed documentation of any incidents that demonstrate instability or poor judgment on the mother's part. Please keep careful records of dates, times, and specific observations. Our first payment of $2,500 has been deposited to the account number you provided. Additional payments will follow as outlined in our agreement. Victoria, $2,500. My sister had sold me out for $2,500. I kept reading, each email making me sicker than the last. Andrea's replies were clinical and detailed, like surveillance reports. Victoria, following up on our conversation. Observed several concerning incidents this week. Monday 3:15, subject appeared disorganized during school pickup. Child seemed hungry and tired. Tuesday 3:16, visited subject's apartment. Found dishes unwashed. Laundry piled on furniture. Overall appearance of poor housekeeping. Child was watching inappropriate television programming. Violent cartoon. Wednesday 3:17, subject canceled family dinner citing work obligations, suggesting possible employment instability. Subject? She was calling me subject like I was a case study instead of her sister. The emails went on for months, each one cataloging my supposed failures as a mother. Everything I'd confided in Andrea, every moment of struggle I'd shared, had been twisted and reported back to Caleb's legal team. But the worst part was discovering how calculated it all was. There were emails where Victoria coached Andrea on what to look for, how to document incidents, and how to present her observations in court. Andrea, remember that the goal is to establish a pattern of instability and poor judgment. Focus on specific examples rather than general concerns. Dates and details are crucial. The judge will be more persuaded by concrete incidents than vague observations about the mother's overall demeanor. There were also emails about payment schedules. Andrea had received $2,500 initially, then $1,000 payments every 2 weeks for ongoing documentation services. The final payment, $5,000, would be made after her testimony in court. My sister had been paid over $12,000 to destroy my life. I printed everything. Every email, every payment confirmation, every detailed report about my parenting. By the time I was finished, I had a stack of evidence 2 inches thick. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to check her bank records. Andrea had mentioned her new savings account several times over the past few months, bragging talking about how she was finally getting serious about building her emergency fund. At the time, I'd been proud of her for taking control of her finances. Now I wondered if that emergency fund was where Caleb's money was going. I found her online banking information saved in her browser, and my suspicions were confirmed immediately. There was an account I'd never seen before, a high-yield savings account she'd opened 4 months ago, right when the emails with Victoria had started. The deposit history told the whole story. Just over $10,000 had already landed in the account, with another payment scheduled after her testimony. I screenshot everything before logging out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the mouse. I had the proof I needed, but I felt sick. This wasn't just about money. Andrea had spent months systematically destroying my reputation, manipulating family relationships, and documenting every small failing to use against me in court. She'd looked me in the eye every Sunday, eaten dinner at my table, played with my son, and then gone home to write reports about what a terrible mother I was. The sister who'd taught me to be strong had spent months plotting to take away the most important thing in my world. And now I had to figure out how to stop her. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I'd made copies of everything and called Rebecca to schedule an emergency meeting. But first, I had to decide whether to confront Andrea directly or let the evidence speak for itself in court. Rebecca made the decision for me. "We need to file for an immediate injunction," she said, after reviewing the printed emails and bank statements. "This appears to be witness tampering and fraud. But more importantly, we need to get Andrea on record before she realizes you know about the arrangement." "What do you mean?" "We're going to call her as a hostile witness. Today, before Victoria Cross can coach her on how to respond to this evidence." An hour later, we were back in Judge Morrison's courtroom, but this time I wasn't the deer in headlights. This time I had ammunition. Andrea was already there, sitting in the front row looking composed and professional. She'd worn her lucky pearl earrings, the ones our grandmother had given her. The sight of them made me angrier than everything else combined. She was using family heirlooms while destroying our family. Judge Morrison looked surprised to see us back so soon. "Ms. Stone, this is highly irregular. The custody hearing isn't scheduled to resume until next week. Your Honor, we've discovered evidence of witness tampering that directly impacts the credibility of testimony already given in this case. We're requesting an immediate hearing to address these serious allegations." Victoria Cross shot to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This appears to be a fishing expedition designed to delay proceedings." "Your Honor," Rebecca continued calmly, "we have documented proof that Mrs. Andrea Porter has been receiving payments from the plaintiff in exchange for testimony against my client. We have bank records, email correspondence, and evidence of coordinated efforts to fabricate a case against the mother." The courtroom went dead silent. Andrea's face had gone completely white, but she was trying to maintain her composure. Caleb, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Judge Morrison studied Rebecca for a long moment. "These are serious allegations, counselor. I hope you have substantial evidence to support them." "We do, Your Honor." "Very well. I'm calling Mrs. Andrea Porter to the stand for questioning under oath." I watched Andrea stand up, and for the first time in months, she looked uncertain. Her usual confidence had cracked just enough for doubt to show through. She walked to the witness stand like she was walking to her execution. When she raised her right hand to take the oath, I noticed it was shaking. "Mrs. Porter," Rebecca began, "you testified earlier that your concerns about my client's parenting stem from genuine worry about your nephew's well-being. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct." "And you stated that you have no ulterior motive for providing testimony in this case?" "That's right. I'm here because I care about Liam." Rebecca nodded and walked to our table, picking up a thick folder. "Mrs. Porter, are you familiar with Victoria Cross?" Andrea's eyes darted to Caleb's legal team. She's the attorney representing my former brother-in-law. Have you ever met with Ms. Cross outside of this courtroom?" I may have spoken with her briefly." "Mrs. Porter, I'll remind you that you're under oath. Have you met with Victoria Cross to discuss this custody case?" The pause was too long. "Yes, we may have discussed the case." "How many times have you met with her?" "I'm not sure. A few times." Rebecca opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. "According to email records we've obtained, you've met with Ms. Cross approximately 12 times over the past 4 months. Does that sound accurate?" Andrea's lawyer, she'd apparently hired her own counsel after we'd requested this hearing, stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Where did this alleged evidence come from?" Judge Morrison looked at Rebecca expectantly. "Your Honor, these are emails from Mrs. Porter's personal account, which she shared access to with my client for family communication purposes. My client discovered this correspondence while looking for family photos for her son's school project. It wasn't exactly the truth, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. Andrea had given me her passwords years ago, and technically I had been looking for photos when I first suspected something was wrong." "I'll allow it," Judge Morrison said. "Mrs. Porter, please answer the question." "I may have met with her more often than I initially remembered." Rebecca pulled out another document. "Mrs. Porter, have you received any compensation for your testimony in this case?" "No." "Mrs. Porter, I'm showing you bank records for a savings account opened in your name 4 months ago. Can you explain these deposits totaling over $10,000, all labeled as legal services and documentation fees?" The silence stretched so long I thought Andrea might have stopped breathing. "Mrs. Porter?" Judge Morrison prompted. Those deposits were for consulting work I did for the law firm." "What kind of consulting work?" "Research, general research." Rebecca smiled grimly. "Mrs. Porter, I'm now showing you an email dated March 4th, sent from Victoria Cross to your personal email address. Would you please read the highlighted portion aloud for the court?" Andrea stared at the paper like it might catch fire. "I'd prefer not to." "Your Honor, may I read it for the record?" "Proceed." Rebecca cleared her throat. "Andrea, thank you for the detailed report on the March 1st incident. Your observations about the subject's disorganized state and the child's apparent distress will be very useful for our case. Please continue documenting similar situations. Payment has been processed as discussed." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. "Mrs. Porter," Rebecca continued, "who is the subject referenced in this email?" I don't recall." "Mrs. Porter, this email is part of a chain of correspondence between you and Ms. Cross spanning 4 months, in which you refer to my client, your own sister, as the subject, while providing detailed reports about her parenting, her living situation, and her personal struggles. Is this correct?" Andrea finally looked at me for the first time since taking the stand. The mask had completely slipped. There was no more pretending to be the concerned sister trying to protect her nephew. "Yes," she whispered. "And you were paid over $10,000 for these reports?" "Yes." "Mrs. Porter, did you edit photographs of the child to remove context that showed him happy or well cared for?" "I don't know what you mean." Rebecca pulled out printed screenshots screenshots from Andrea's laptop. These are before and after versions of the same photograph, taken from your computer. In the original, Liam is holding his mother's hand and smiling. In the edited version, the mother has been cropped out, leaving only an image of the child looking tired. Can you explain this? Andrea stared at the photos, and something broke behind her eyes. She doesn't deserve him, she said suddenly, her voice louder than it had been all day. She never deserved him. Excuse me? My sister has always been a mess. I've spent my whole life cleaning up after her, and now she has this perfect little boy who deserves better than her chaos. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Judge Morrison was writing furiously. Mrs. Porter, Rebecca started, but Andrea kept talking. I did everything for her. Everything. I helped her through her disaster of a marriage. I watched her kid when she couldn't be bothered to arrange proper childcare. I listened to her complain about money while she made terrible decisions over and over again. Victoria Cross was gesturing frantically for Andrea to stop talking, but Andrea was past caring about legal strategy. She calls herself a single mother like it's some kind of badge of honor, but she can barely take care of herself. That apartment is a disaster zone. She feeds him cereal for dinner and lets him watch inappropriate shows because she's too tired to parent properly. Liam needs stability, not whatever mess my sister calls a life. Mrs. Porter, Judge Morrison interrupted. Are you saying your testimony about your sister's parenting was motivated by personal resentment rather than genuine concern? I'm saying someone needed to tell the truth about what kind of mother she really is instead of pretending she's some kind of saint because she got divorced. The courtroom erupted. Caleb's lawyer was trying to distance herself from Andrea's outburst. My lawyer was taking notes as fast as she could write, and I was watching my sister self-destruct on the witness stand. So you admit that you were not providing objective testimony about your observations, but rather were actively working to discredit the mother? Judge Morrison asked. I was providing accurate testimony about what I observed. Testimony you were paid to provide after meeting extensively with the father's legal team to plan strategy? Andrea's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought if Caleb had custody, Liam would have a more stable life. I thought I was helping him. By taking money to spy on your sister and edit photographs to make her look like an unfit mother? I needed the money, she said quietly, and I thought it was the right thing to do for Liam. Judge Morrison set down her pen and looked at Andrea with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who kicked puppies. Mrs. Porter, what you've described is not concern for a child's welfare. It's witness tampering, fraud, and a profound betrayal of family trust. Your testimony is stricken, and I'm referring this matter to the district attorney to review for potential criminal charges. Andrea finally looked at me again, and for a moment, I saw the sister I used to know, the one who looked scared and lost and sorry for what she'd done, but it was too late for sorry. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, given the extensive evidence of coordination between the father's legal team and a witness who is being financially compensated for testimony, I'm awarding full custody of the minor child to the mother, effective immediately. The gavel came down like thunder. Caleb's face was the color of old snow. Victoria Cross was packing her briefcase like the building was on fire, and Andrea was sitting in the witness box, crying for the first time since our mother's funeral. I should have felt victorious. I'd won. Liam was mine, and no one could take him away from me now. Instead, I felt empty, because winning meant my sister had lost everything, her reputation, her integrity, and any chance of being part of our family again. The woman who'd taught me to be strong had destroyed herself trying to prove I was weak. And the worst part was, she'd been wrong about everything. The news traveled fast through our family. By the time I got home from court, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages from relatives who'd heard bits and pieces of what happened. Some were shocked. Others admitted they'd suspected something was wrong with Andrea's behavior lately but hadn't wanted to say anything. Our cousin Rachel was the first to call. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. I should have questioned what Andrea was telling me instead of just believing it. What did she tell you? That you were struggling more than you wanted to admit. That you'd gotten defensive when she tried to help. She made it sound like you were having some kind of breakdown and couldn't see it. I'd wondered how many of these conversations had happened behind my back. How many family members had been walking on eggshells around me because Andrea had convinced them I was fragile and unstable. She was building a narrative, I told Rachel, making everyone think I couldn't handle being a single mother so that when she testified against me, it would seem believable. It worked, Rachel admitted. I was worried about you, but I thought pushing too hard would make things worse. I should have trusted my instincts and talked to you directly. That conversation repeated itself over the next few days with different relatives. Andrea had been so thorough in her manipulation that she'd convinced half the family I was falling apart. Now they were all backtracking, apologizing for believing her version of events. The hardest call came from our father. I don't understand, he said, and he sounded older than I'd ever heard him. Why would she do this to you? To Liam? I think she convinced herself she was helping him, I said. She thought I wasn't good enough to be his mother, and somehow that justified everything else. But the money, the money makes it harder to excuse. Dad was quiet for a long time. I never want to see her again, he finally said. What she did to you, what she put Liam through, I'm done with her. The finality in his voice surprised me. Dad had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and encouraged forgiveness. But this was beyond anything that could be smoothed over. Andrea tried to contact me exactly once. She sent a long email 3 days after the court hearing, and I almost deleted it without reading it. But curiosity won out. It was a masterpiece of self-justification. She was sorry things had gotten out of hand, but maintained that her concerns about my parenting were legitimate. She claimed the money had been incidental. Victoria Cross had offered to pay her for her time, and she'd accepted because she needed the financial help. She said she hoped someday I'd understand that everything she'd done came from a place of love for Liam. Love, the word made me sick. I didn't respond to the email. What was there to say? That love doesn't involve taking money to spy on someone? That love doesn't include editing photos to make a child look miserable? That love doesn't mean systematically destroying someone's reputation and trying to take away their child? Andrea had redefined love to justify her actions, but her definition was unrecognizable to me. The legal consequences came quickly. The district attorney's office was very interested in the witness tampering case, especially given how thoroughly documented everything was. Victoria Cross was facing her own ethics investigation for coordinating paid testimony. Caleb, meanwhile, had disappeared. His lawyers withdrew from the case, and he'd apparently moved back in with his parents in Arizona. The last I heard, he was trying to get a job selling insurance in Phoenix Phoenix and pretending none of this had ever happened. But the most important consequence was the simplest one. I got to keep my son. The custody order was ironclad. Liam would live with me full-time, with standard visitation rights for his father if and when Caleb decided to exercise them. Given that he'd fled the state and shown no interest in actually spending time with Liam, I wasn't holding my breath. Explaining everything to a 6-year-old was harder than I'd expected. Why doesn't Aunt Andrea come to Sunday dinner anymore? Liam asked one evening while we were making pancakes for dinner, something Andrea would definitely have judged, but which made him incredibly happy. Aunt Andrea made some bad choices, I told him. She said things that weren't true about our family and now she can't visit us anymore. Was she lying? Yes, she was lying. Why would she lie about us? It was a good question, and I didn't have a good answer. Sometimes adults make really bad decisions, even when they think they're doing the right thing. Aunt Andrea thought she knew what was best for you, but she was wrong. Liam considered this while flipping his pancake. I like living with you, he said finally. I like living with you too, buddy, and I don't want to live with Daddy. You don't have to. You're staying right here with me. That seemed to satisfy him, and we moved on to discussing whether chocolate chips belonged in pancakes. His position, absolutely. Or should be saved for dessert. My position, maybe sometimes. The simplicity of his acceptance helped put everything in perspective. Liam had never doubted that he belonged with me. He'd never seen me as the unstable, inadequate mother Andrea had tried to portray in court. To him, I was just mom, the person who made his breakfast, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and loved him unconditionally. Andrea's elaborate conspiracy had been based on a fundamental lie, that I wasn't good enough for my own child. But the only person whose opinion really mattered had never believed that lie for a second. 6 months later, I can honestly say my life is better without Andrea in it. I'd thought losing my sister would leave a permanent hole in my world, but instead it felt like finally being able to breathe freely. I stopped second-guessing every parenting decision, wondering if someone was keeping score of my mistakes. I stopped apologizing for my apartment not being perfect, or for giving Liam cereal for dinner when we'd had a long day. I started trusting my own instincts about what my son needed, instead of filtering everything through someone else's judgment. Our Sunday family dinners moved to Dad's house, and they're lighter now, less tense. We don't have to watch our words or worry about casual comments being twisted into evidence against us later. Liam plays with the same puzzles Andrea used to keep for him, but now he can enjoy them without someone documenting his every reaction for ulterior motives. The hardest part is explaining to people what happened. When someone asks about my sister, I have to decide whether to give the short version, we're not close anymore, or the long version, everything I've just told you. Most people can't quite wrap their heads around the idea that someone would spy on their own family for money. It seems too cruel, too calculated. But I've learned that people are capable of darker things than we want to believe, especially when they convince themselves their motivations are pure. Andrea genuinely believed she was saving Liam from an inadequate mother. The money just made it easier to justify what she was already inclined to do. I've also learned to trust my instincts about people's behavior, even when it means acknowledging uncomfortable truths about someone I love. The signs were there for months, the subtle digs, the public criticism, the mysterious schedule changes. I ignored them because I couldn't imagine my own sister betraying me so completely. Now I know better. Trust is earned every day, not guaranteed by shared DNA. Liam is thriving. He's doing well in school, he's made new friends, and he's started taking piano lessons because he heard me humming while cooking dinner one night and decided he wanted to make music too. He rarely asks about his father or his aunt anymore. His world is full enough with the people who choose to be in it consistently and honestly. As for me, I'm stronger than I was before this whole nightmare started, not because I survived my sister's betrayal, but because I learned I could trust myself to protect what matters most. I didn't fall apart when everyone told me I was falling apart. I didn't lose my son to someone who claimed to know better than I did what he needed. I kept fighting for the truth, even when the truth was uglier than I wanted it to be. And in the end, the truth set both of us free. Sometimes I wonder if Andrea realizes what she lost. Not just the money she'll have to pay back, or the criminal charges she's facing, or the family relationships she destroyed, but the genuine love and trust of the people who had supported her unconditionally for her entire life. She traded all of that for $12,000 and the temporary satisfaction of being right about something she was completely wrong about. It wasn't worth it, not even close. But I'm grateful it happened because now Liam and I know exactly who we can count on. Each other and the people who stand by us without expecting payment or keeping score. That's a pretty solid foundation for whatever comes next.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.